She thought she could keep lying, but I've been watching her every move. When betrayal runs this deep, someone has to pay. And this time, I'm making the rules. I stood there, watching as Heather left the house again. The sharp clack of her heels echoed off the concrete steps, each sound hitting me like a ticking clock counting down to something inevitable. Her walk was unmistakable, that confident, almost careless stride, like nothing in the world could bother her. She moved like someone who had everything exactly where she wanted it, and maybe she did. At that moment, she had no clue I was there, hidden just enough in the shadows of an old oak tree across the street. Heather was too deep in her routine to catch anything unusual. I'd memorized that routine by now, every little detail of it. I had studied her, down to the way she checked her hair in the side mirror of her car. It wasn't a nervous tick, it was intentional, like an actress getting into character for her next scene. From where I was, I could see the faint, satisfied smile on her lips. Her hair, still slightly messy from fingers running through it not too long ago, framed her face in soft waves. Her makeup was a bit smudged, just enough that most people wouldn't notice, but I noticed. I saw everything. She had that glow now, the kind that comes from a satisfaction she hadn't gotten from me in months. I knew exactly where she'd been and who she'd been with. Kevin. Even saying his name in my head felt wrong, like something bitter I wanted to spit out. Kevin with his designer suits, his too-perfect smile, and his picture-perfect life. I'd seen him around at work functions back when I still thought Heather and I were okay, back when I was just the clueless husband shaking hands with the man who'd end up sleeping with my wife. As Heather strolled toward her car, her smile widened. She glanced back at the house, just a quick look, like she was double-checking that everything was still in place, her little secrets still tucked away neatly. She didn't see me standing there. She had no idea I'd been watching her for weeks, my suspicions slowly morphing into a dark, unshakable truth. She slid into the black sedan I had bought her for our 10th anniversary. It was supposed to be a symbol of our life together, a marker of the stability I thought we had. Now, it was just another piece of her lies. I could almost hear her rehearsing her lines as she turned on the engine. "Hey, babe, just leaving the office. Traffic's awful. Want me to grab dinner on my way home?" I'd heard it all before, those small, effortless lies she told, spinning them like a web, and I had been caught in it, blind and trusting, until I couldn't be anymore. Heather would call me, like clockwork. I could predict it to the minute now. But tonight, I wouldn't pick up. Tonight, I had different plans. I watched as she drove off, blending into the evening traffic, her car disappearing around the corner. I didn't need to follow her. I knew exactly where she was headed, back to our house, the one we bought together right after we got married, the house that was supposed to be filled with love, memories, and a future. Now, it was just another stage for her performance. I waited until I was sure she was gone before crossing the street. My heart was hammering in my chest, but my hands were steady. I'd played this moment over in my mind so many times. I'd been patient, maybe too patient, but now it was time to act. I walked up to Kevin's house, the sleek, modern place that had become their secret hideaway. It was all glass and steel, sticking out like an eyesore in this otherwise quiet neighborhood. I knew he'd be leaving soon. Heather never stayed long, she was careful not to overdo it. I felt the weight of the taser in my pocket, its cold metal pressing against my thigh. I wasn't planning on using it, at least not yet, but just knowing it was there gave me a strange sense of control, a power I hadn't felt in a long time. I waited, hidden in the shadows, my gaze locked on the front door. Time seemed to slow, each minute stretching painfully as I pictured what I might walk in on if I barged through that door, them, still wrapped around each other, still sharing the lies they'd built together. Then, the door creaked open. Kevin stepped out, looking exactly like the kind of guy who would sleep with another man's wife. His collar was undone, and his sleeves were casually rolled up, as though he had just come from a relaxing tennis match instead of destroying someone's marriage. He scanned the area, his expression calm, completely unaware that his life was about to take a sharp turn. I moved out from the shadows, closing the gap between us with a few quick strides. The moment he spotted me, confusion flickered across his face, quickly followed by recognition. He knew exactly who I was. "Do you know who I am?" I asked, my voice steady, as I raised the taser toward him. He didn't respond immediately. His eyes darted to the taser, then back to me. I caught a glimpse of fear, just a sliver, but it was there. "Yes," he finally breathed, his voice barely a whisper. He took a tiny step back, clearly trying to create some space between us. "Then you know what's coming," I said, feeling a smile spread across my face, a twisted kind of smile I hardly recognized, one that comes when you know you're about to change everything. Kevin's face lost its color. He swallowed hard, his eyes narrowing slightly, as if he was weighing his options. But I wasn't giving him the luxury of time. The thinking part was over. This was just the beginning. I had played the fool for too long, ignored the lies, and turned a blind eye to the betrayal and whispered secrets. But now, the truth was about to surface, and I was ready to drag it into the light, no matter the cost. The game had started, and I wasn't planning on losing. As my words sank in, Kevin's demeanor shifted. The calm mask he wore cracked, and I could see fear mixing with a touch of defiance in his eyes. His fingers twitched as if he was contemplating making a move. I gripped the taser tighter, aiming it straight at his chest. My pulse pounded in my ears, the adrenaline rushing through me like fire. "You're not going anywhere," I said, my voice as cold as steel. "Not until we have a little talk." Kevin's throat bobbed as he swallowed, but he didn't try to run. Maybe he thought he could charm his way out of this, the same way he'd charmed Heather. I could practically see the gears turning in his head, trying to figure out how to handle me. "Listen," he started, raising his hand slightly, as if surrendering. His tone was calm, way too calm for my liking. "I'm not sure what you think you know, but—" "Cut the crap," I interrupted sharply, shutting him down before he could spin more lies. "I'm not here for excuses. I want the truth." "The truth?" he repeated, still trying to act innocent. His smile was small, but it was too tight, like he was holding something back. "What truth, exactly?" I stepped closer, closing the gap between us, the air between us thick with tension. "Don't play dumb with me," I growled, my voice low and menacing. "You know exactly what I'm talking about. I've been watching this house, watching her come and go. So don't stand there and pretend like you don't know." For a brief moment, something flickered in Kevin's eyes, fear or maybe realization. He opened his mouth, probably to offer another lie, but I wasn't having any of it. I surged forward, shoving him hard against the side of his car, the taser pressed firmly to his chest. He let out a sharp gasp, his hands instinctively coming up to push me away, but I stood my ground. All right, he stammered, his calm exterior starting to crumble just a bit. "Let's just take a step back, okay? No need to do anything rash here." I chuckled, a bitter, low sound. "Rash?" I said, leaning in closer, my voice barely above a whisper but sharp as glass. "You think this is rash? You don't know the half of it, but you're about to find out." The taser stayed pressed firmly against him, and I could feel his body tense, his hands trembling just slightly. I could sense the shift in power between us, the moment he realized he was no longer in control. His eyes darted past me, scanning the empty street, probably hoping for a witness, someone to come to his aid. "No one's coming for you," I said, following his line of thought. "Not tonight." He sucked in a shaky breath, trying to steady himself. "Listen," he said, his voice quieter now, more cautious, "whatever you think is going on, we can talk about it. We don't need to talk." I interrupted, my grip on the taser tightening. "Talk is cheap, Kevin. I've had enough of your talking. Now it's time for action." He winced at that, his eyes narrowing a bit as he clearly searched for some way out, some opening to defuse the situation. I saw him start to relax ever so slightly, and that's when he made his move. Pushing off the car, his hand shot out, grabbing for my wrist, trying to wrestle the taser from me. But I was ready. I twisted sharply, using his momentum against him, and drove my knee into his stomach. He groaned, doubling over, and I shoved him back against the car, this time pressing the taser harder into his ribs. "I warned you," I said, my voice unnervingly calm. "No games." He was breathing hard now, short, ragged breaths escaping him as he looked up at me, fear and anger swirling in his eyes. "You're crazy," he muttered, but the words lacked any real conviction, they were filled more with desperation than anything else. "Maybe I am," I said, a smile slowly spreading across my face, "or maybe I'm just a man who's finally had enough." I held him there for a moment longer, feeling the electric tension between us pulse through the air. Then, I slowly pulled the taser back, just an inch, enough to let him catch his breath but not enough to let him think he was safe. "Now you're going to listen," I said, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "You're going to tell me everything, and if I even think for a second that you're lying." I let the rest of the sentence hang in the air, unspoken but loud enough. Kevin's eyes flickered around again, but he seemed to realize he had no way out. His shoulders sagged just a bit, and he nodded reluctantly. "Okay," he said, barely more than a whisper. "I'll tell you. Just let me breathe." I gave a small nod and took a step back, still holding the taser ready. He straightened up slowly, rubbing his side where I had pressed the taser, his face a mix of defiance and resignation. He looked like a man trapped with no way out, desperate but aware that there was no escape. "Start talking," I said, my voice hard, "and don't make me regret giving you this chance." Kevin drew in a deep breath, glancing once more toward the house like it might hold some last-minute salvation, but he knew better, there was no escape tonight, not until I got what I came for. The street around us was eerily quiet, too quiet, like the whole world was waiting, holding its breath to see what would happen next. The tension was thick in the air, and I could feel the weight of whatever was about to unfold. I knew, deep in my gut, that whatever Kevin said next would change everything. But I wasn't about to let him off that easily. Not yet. Not until I had pulled every single truth out of him, piece by piece. Whether he liked it or not, I would keep pressing, keep digging until there was nothing left for him to hide. Because no matter what kind of game they'd been playing, I was going to come out on top. Kevin's eyes shifted toward the front door of his house, like he was hoping someone, maybe even Heather, would burst out and rescue him. But the street was dead quiet, and I wasn't about to let him stall any longer. My grip tightened around the taser, the cold metal reassuring in my hand, a solid reminder that I was the one in control now. "Start talking," I demanded, my voice low but carrying enough weight to cut through the silence. "Who is she to you?" Kevin hesitated, his mouth opening and closing like he was searching for the right words. He looked like he was deciding whether to lie or finally come clean. I stepped closer, my patience wearing thin. "Don't make me ask again," I warned, my body tense, ready for whatever he might try next. For a moment, Kevin locked eyes with me, and I could see the thought flicker in his mind, whether he should take another shot at me. But then, he let out a long breath, his shoulders slumping as if the fight had drained out of him. "All right," he muttered, his voice resigned. "You want the truth? Fine. Heather and we've been seeing each other for months." His confession hit like a punch, sharp and stinging. I felt a wave of heat rise inside me, my grip on the taser tightening until I thought I might break it. "Seeing each other?" I repeated, my voice taut with disbelief. "How long?" Kevin glanced down, swallowing hard. 6 months, maybe more. "I don't know, it just happened." My mind spun at his words. 6 months. Half a year of lies. I started replaying everything in my head, every late night, every strange phone call, the unfamiliar perfume. All the puzzle pieces clicked into place now. I had been a fool. A complete fool. But not anymore. And what? I said, shoving the taser harder into his ribs. You thought I'd just stand by while you screwed my wife behind my back. Kevin flinched, a drop of sweat rolling down his temple. No, it wasn't like that. It wasn't some big plan, all right. She was unhappy. I was unhappy. It wasn't supposed to be this thing. I shook my head, my grip on the taser firm. Don't try to justify it, I snapped, my voice sharp. You think telling me she was unhappy makes it better? You think that's supposed to make this okay? Kevin's breathing quickened, his eyes darting around again like he was searching for a way out. Look, Matt, he started, his voice shaky now, I never wanted you to find out like this. You didn't want me to find out? I interrupted, my anger flaring. That's your excuse. You think it matters how I found out? Before he could say another word, I stepped back and kicked the car door behind him, slamming it shut with a loud crash that echoed through the empty street. Kevin flinched, and I saw the fear flash in his eyes once again. I took a deep breath, forcing myself to stay in control, to keep my head clear. I needed more answers. I needed to know just how deep this betrayal went. Where did you meet her? I demanded, my voice sharp and insistent. How did it start? Kevin swallowed, his gaze flickering between me and the taser. It was at that charity event, he finally admitted, his voice barely a whisper. She was there with you. We talked, exchanged numbers. It was innocent at first, just some texts, a few emails. But then, it got serious. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. I remembered that night clearly. Heather had worn that stunning blue dress, the one that hugged her in all the right places. She had been laughing, glowing, drawing everyone's attention, including his, it seemed. And you just kept going? I asked, my voice flat, drained of any emotion. You didn't stop to think about what this would do to me? To our marriage? Kevin's face twisted into a grimace, a flicker of guilt flashing across his features. It wasn't about you, Matt, he muttered quietly. It was about me and her. I swear, it wasn't meant to hurt you. I stepped closer, feeling my blood boil, my pulse quickening. You think that makes it better? I growled. You think any of this matters to me now? He raised his hand slightly, as if trying to calm me down. Look, man, I'm sorry. I really am. If there's anything I can do to fix this. Fix it? I cut him off with a dark laugh. You actually think there's a way to fix this? Desperation flashed in Kevin's eyes. I'll stop seeing her, he blurted. I'll end it tonight. I'll tell her it's over. Just don't do anything crazy. I paused, letting his words sink in, my heart pounding in my chest, my thoughts a storm of anger and disbelief. The weight of the betrayal, the lies, and months of deceit hung heavy in the air. Every part of me wanted to lash out, to make him suffer for what he'd done. But instead, I took a breath, forcing myself to stay calm, to think clearly. No, I finally said, my voice cold and controlled. You don't get to decide how this ends. You've had your fun, Kevin. You played your game. Now, it's my turn. Before he could react, I grabbed him by the collar and yanked him forward, spinning him around and slamming him against the car, face first. He grunted, his hands slapping against the metal, trying to steady himself. I leaned in close, my breath hot against his ear. You're going to tell me everything, I hissed, pressing the taser harder into his side. Every single detail. Every lie. Every moment you spent with her. I want to know how long this has been going on, where you went, what you did. And you're going to tell me right now. Kevin squirmed against the car, his breathing ragged, panic written all over his face. Okay, he gasped. I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything. Just, don't hurt me. I tightened my grip on his collar, pushing him harder against the car. You should have thought about that before, I said coldly. Now start talking before I decide I've had enough. Kevin started to speak, his words tumbling out in a desperate rush, a frantic confession. As he spilled the details, something inside me hardened, a cold resolve settling over me. I was going to drag every single lie into the light. I would expose every secret, every deceit they thought they could keep hidden. The truth was out now, and there was no turning back. Kevin's words came out in a mix of fear, guilt, and desperation. I kept him pinned against the car, my grip tight on his collar, my heart pounding with each new revelation. I wasn't letting him off the hook that easily. I needed to know everything. I needed to hear every dirty detail. It started with drinks, Kevin said, his voice trembling. It was innocent at first, just a couple of cocktails after work at that bar on 8th Street. Heather said she needed someone to talk to, someone who wasn't you. Cut the crap, I snapped, shoving him harder into the car. I don't care about the drinks. What happened next? Kevin winced but continued, his words spilling out faster now. All right. We went back to my place a few times. She said it wasn't serious, just an escape. We'd meet up every few days, whenever she said she needed to get away. I clenched my jaw, the sting of betrayal digging in deeper, the knife twisting inside me. And you thought that was okay? I snarled. You thought you could just take whatever you wanted? He was panting, struggling to speak. I didn't. I wasn't trying to hurt you, Matt. I swear. Heather kept saying she'd end it, that she was just confused. But it just kept going. Kept going. I repeated, my voice low and dangerous. How long, Kevin? How many times? He hesitated, and I shoved him again. How many? Too many, he choked out. I don't know. 10, 15 times, maybe more. We met at hotels, at her office, even here. She just kept coming back, and I let it happen. Every word he said felt like a punch to the gut. 15 times. More. Heather had lied to my face, night after night, coming home to me after being with him. The rage inside me burned hotter, but I forced myself to stay focused. Why? I demanded, my grip tightening around his collar. Why did she keep coming back? Kevin's breathing was shallow, his voice coming out as a rasp. She said it was the thrill, the excitement. Something she didn't feel with you anymore. But I swear, she always said she loved you, that she'd never leave you. I felt the blood drain from my face. Loved me? Was that supposed to make any of this better? The woman I had spent over a decade loving was off chasing thrills with another man while keeping me in the dark. My hand twitched on the taser, the temptation to shock him nearly overwhelming, but I resisted. I wasn't done yet, there was more I needed to know. Where? I asked again, my voice low and cold. Where did you take her? Mostly here, he stammered, but a few times at that old motel off the interstate, the Golden Oaks. She liked the secrecy, said it made things more exciting. And once at your place. I froze. The air around me felt thick, my muscles locking up with tension. My place. I repeated slowly, the disbelief slicing through my anger like a blade. She brought you into my home. Kevin nodded, his face twisted in fear and regret. It was just one time. She insisted. Said she wanted to know what it felt like to have me there. I told her it was a bad idea, but I didn't let him finish. My fist slammed into the car beside his head with a loud thud that echoed through the quiet street. Kevin flinched, his eyes going wide with shock. My home, I growled, barely able to contain the rage boiling inside me. You both had the audacity to do this in my home? He trembled under my grip, his eyes darting around like he was searching for an escape he knew didn't exist. It wasn't my idea, he begged. I swear, I didn't want to, but she said. Shut up. I shouted, my voice cracking through the night like a whip. I was losing control, and I could feel it. I had to pull myself together. I forced a deep breath, trying to calm my thoughts, trying to think through the anger. I needed a plan. I needed to figure out what came next. All right, I said finally, my voice calmer but still seething with fury. We're done here for now. But don't think this is over, Kevin. Not by a long shot. He looked at me, confused, as I yanked him away from the car and shoved him toward his front door. Go inside, I ordered, my voice steady but threatening. And if I see you near Heather again, if I even hear your name come up, you'll wish I'd ended this tonight. He stumbled, catching himself on the doorframe, nodding frantically. Okay. I get it, Matt. I'm done. I'll stay away. I didn't bother answering, just watched him fumble for his keys, his hands shaking as he disappeared into the house. For a moment, I stood there, letting the cool night air hit my face, trying to calm the storm that raged inside me. But I wasn't calm. I was far from it. Turning back toward my car, my mind spun. I knew what I had to do next. I had to face Heather. I needed to hear it straight from her, to see her face when she tried to lie to me again. As I reached the car, I pulled out my phone, my thumb hovering over her contact. I hesitated, just for a second, thinking maybe I should wait, plan things out more carefully. But the anger flared up inside me, too strong to ignore. I hit the call button. It rang once, twice, 3 times, and then she picked up. Hey, babe, Heather's voice was light, cheerful, completely unaware of what was coming. Just got home. Where are you? My jaw tightened, my grip on the phone so tight it felt like it might break. I know, I said, my voice flat, barely hiding the fury simmering beneath the surface. I know everything, Heather. There was a pause, a silence that stretched on for what felt like forever. Then her voice returned, softer now, more guarded. What are you talking about? You know exactly what I mean, I replied, my tone cold as ice. And we're going to talk about it. Right now. I hung up before she could say anything else, my hands shaking with a mixture of anger and anticipation. I started the car, my mind already racing ahead to the inevitable confrontation that was about to happen. The night wasn't over. Not by a long shot. And I was ready for whatever came next. I drove home, gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. Each mile dragged on, feeling like an eternity. The streetlights blurred by, but my mind raced even faster. The adrenaline surged through me, a volatile cocktail of anger, anticipation, and dread pushing me forward. Heather was waiting, and I was about to rip through whatever lies she had left to tell. As I pulled into the driveway, the soft glow of light seeped through the front windows. Heather was inside, probably pacing, trying to figure out how much I knew and what she could say to save herself. I slammed the car door shut and marched up to the house, my heart pounding in my chest like a war drum. When I stepped inside, there she was. Heather stood in the middle of the living room, her arms crossed over her chest like she was bracing for impact. Her face was a mix of worry, confusion, and something else, guilt. She hadn't even changed. She was still in the same outfit I'd seen her leave Kevin's place in, the fitted blazer, tight skirt, and that red lipstick, now smudged at the corners. She hadn't bothered hiding where she'd been. Matt, she began, her voice cautious, like she was feeling her way through a minefield. What's going on? You sounded upset on the phone. I didn't respond right away. I stepped closer, closing the gap between us, my eyes locked onto hers. I wanted to see every reaction, every flicker of emotion, every hint of guilt. She wasn't going to lie her way out of this. "Cut the act, Heather," I said, my voice sharp and cold. "I know where you were. I know who you've been with. And I know how long this has been going on." She flinched, just a little, but enough for me to catch it. Her eyes widened for a second, and a flicker of panic crossed her face before she tried to cover it with a calm, collected expression. "Matt, I have no idea what you're talking about," she lied, her voice too smooth, too controlled. "Really?" I shot back, the anger rising in me like a storm. "You want to pretend you haven't been sneaking around with Kevin? You want to act like I haven't been watching you, tracking every move you've made for weeks?" Her mouth opened, then closed again. For a brief moment, she was at a loss for words. I could see her mind racing, scrambling to find a way out, some excuse that might buy her time. She was good at this, I'd give her that, but I was done playing her games. "Don't lie to me," I shouted, stepping closer, my voice echoing off the walls. "I talked to him, Heather. He told me everything. Every last detail." Her eyes widened further, and for the first time, I saw her mask crack. Her hands fell to her sides, and I noticed they were trembling. You talked to Kevin," she stammered, her voice unsteady. "Yeah," I said, my words thick with rage. "I talked to him right after I watched you leave his house. So don't even bother lying now. It's over. You're caught." Heather's face turned pale, and she took a step back, like my words had physically struck her. I watched as her eyes darted around the room, looking at anything but me. She was cornered, and she knew it. "Matt," she began, her voice soft, almost pleading. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. I never meant for you to find out this way. You never meant for me to find out." I cut her off, my voice a low growl filled with fury. "That's what you're sorry about? Not the fact that you've been screwing around behind my back for half a year?" She flinched, her face twisting between shame and defiance. "I'm sorry, okay," she snapped, her voice rising with frustration. "I'm sorry you found out like this, but it's not as simple as you think, Matt. I was unhappy. I needed something different." "Different?" I scoffed, my anger flaring even hotter. "So your solution was to crawl into bed with him? To sneak around behind my back like a coward instead of talking to me?" She shook her head, her eyes flashing with frustration. "It's not that simple," she said again, her voice trembling. "You don't get it. I felt trapped. I felt like I was suffocating, like I was losing who I was." "Losing yourself?" I repeated, my voice dripping with sarcasm. "And you found yourself in his bed? That's your excuse?" Heather took a deep breath, her hands shaking as she ran them through her hair. "Matt, I didn't want to hurt you. I swear I didn't. I just, somewhere along the way, I got lost." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound sharp and hollow. "Lost?" I echoed. "You were lost all right, in his house, in his bed, while I sat here believing every word you said. Trusting you." Her lip quivered, and her eyes began to water, but I couldn't tell if it was guilt or just the fear of what was coming next. "Please, Matt," she whispered, her voice cracking. "We can talk about this. We can work through it. I still love you." "Love?" I spat, the word tasting like poison on my tongue. "You don't get to say that, Heather. Not after this. Not after what you've done." She took a step toward me, her hand reaching out as if to touch me, to somehow make me believe her. "Matt, please. Just hear me out." I stepped back, out of her reach, shaking my head. "No," I said firmly, my voice hard as stone. "I've heard enough. You had your chance to be honest, and you chose lies. There's nothing left to talk about." Heather's face twisted with a mix of anger and desperation. I could see her struggling to hold it together, her eyes wild with panic as she realized how deep a hole she was in. "Matt, don't do this," she begged, her voice trembling. "Don't throw everything away because of one mistake." "One mistake?" I shouted, the rage boiling up in me again. "This wasn't some slip-up, Heather. It was a choice. You chose him over and over again for months. You threw it all away the moment you decided to betray me." Her face crumpled, and she took a step back, her shoulders slumping in defeat. What do you want me to say?" she whispered, her voice barely audible. "What do you want from me?" I stared at her, my chest rising and falling rapidly, my hands still trembling from the adrenaline coursing through me. "I want the truth," I finally said, my voice cold as ice. "All of it. No more lies. No more games. Just the truth." Heather swallowed hard, her eyes glistening with tears she hadn't yet shed. She nodded slowly, wiping her face with the back of her hand. "Okay," she said softly, her voice broken. "Okay, I'll tell you everything." I crossed my arms over my chest, waiting, my heart pounding in my ears. This was the moment I had dreaded, but it was also the moment I needed. The truth was coming, and I was ready to face it, no matter how ugly it was. As Heather began to speak, I knew there was no turning back now. She stood in the middle of the living room, her shoulders slumped, her eyes scanning mine for any sign of softness, for any hint that I might forgive her. But there was nothing for her to find. I stayed silent, my arms crossed tightly over my chest, trying to stop myself from shaking with the rage still simmering inside me. "Okay," she repeated, more to herself than to me, like she was trying to muster up the courage to speak. Her hands fidgeted nervously at her sides, her fingers twisting together. I don't even know where to start." "Try the beginning," I said, my voice cold and controlled. "How long has this been going on? How did it even start?" Heather took a deep breath, her voice barely above a whisper. "It started about 8 months ago," she admitted, her eyes glued to the floor. "We met at that charity event, the hospital fundraiser. You remember that night, don't you?" I nodded stiffly, jaw clenched. "Yeah, I remember," I muttered. "Go on." Heather couldn't look me in the eye. "You were busy talking to some clients, and I saw Kevin at the bar. We started talking. At first, it was nothing, just small talk, you know. But then, I don't know, there was this connection. We laughed. We had a couple of drinks, and it just felt so easy." "Easy?" I repeated, my anger simmering beneath the surface. "What the hell is that supposed to mean, Heather?" She flinched at my words, her hands still twisting together. "I don't know," she snapped, frustration growing as she struggled to make sense of it herself. "It felt different, okay? Like I could be someone else for once, someone fun, carefree. Someone who wasn't tied down by all the responsibilities and expectations." I shook my head, disbelief and fury rising in equal measure. "So, you decided to be this fun person by sleeping with another man?" I shot back, my voice dripping with contempt. She winced at the word sleeping, her face contorting with both shame and defiance. "I didn't plan it," she shouted, her voice cracking. "I didn't wake up one day and decide to cheat on you, Matt. It happened. It just happened." I scoffed, stepping closer, fists clenched at my sides. "That's what you're going with? It just happened?" Heather bit her lip, her eyes flashing with a mix of frustration and pain. "Yes," she hissed, her voice shaking. "One night after work, we met up, and one thing led to another. We kissed, and I couldn't stop. It felt exciting." "Exciting?" I echoed, the word burning in my throat like acid. Was it exciting sneaking around behind my back? Was it thrilling to lie to me every single day? Tears welled up in her eyes, but I couldn't tell if they came from guilt or fear of being exposed. "I'm not proud of it," she whispered, her voice breaking with emotion. "I know I hurt you, Matt. I know I messed up, but it wasn't just physical, okay? It was emotional too." Her words made my stomach churn, a sickening feeling spreading through me like poison. "Emotional?" I repeated, my voice hoarse. "So what, you're telling me you love him now?" She hesitated, and for a brief moment, I thought she might deny it, try to salvage something from the wreckage of our marriage. But then, she shook her head slowly. "No," she said quietly, her voice small. "It wasn't love. It was comfort. He made me feel wanted in a way I hadn't felt in so long." I took a deep breath, fighting to keep my emotions under control, though every word felt like a knife twisting deeper into my gut. "So this is my fault then?" I asked, my voice tight with bitterness. "I didn't make you feel wanted enough?" "No, Matt," she protested, taking a hesitant step toward me. "It wasn't like that. I was just lost. I needed something, and he was there." I let out a bitter laugh, the sound harsh and empty. "So, you used him to feel better about yourself," I shot back. "And what about me, Heather? What was I supposed to be? Just the clueless husband waiting at home for you to come back?" Heather shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks now. "I didn't mean for it to go this far," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I thought I could control it. I thought I could keep it separate, keep it from touching us." "Well, you were wrong," I said flatly, my voice as hard as stone. "Because it did touch us. It destroyed us, Heather. All your little secrets and lies, they've torn everything apart." Heather sobbed, covering her face with her hands, her shoulders shaking as the weight of it all crashed over her. For just a second, I felt a flicker of sympathy, a brief reminder of the love I once had for her. But it was quickly smothered beneath the anger and the betrayal that now defined us. "You need to leave," I said at last, my voice firm and cold. "Tonight. Get out." Heather looked up at me, her eyes wide in disbelief. "What?" "No, Matt, please. We can fix this. We can." "There's nothing left to fix," I interrupted, my tone final and unyielding. "You made your choice, and now you have to live with it. Pack your things and go." She stared at me, her mouth opening and closing like she wanted to argue, to say something that might change my mind. But I could see the moment she realized it was pointless. Slowly, she nodded, wiping her tears away with the back of her hand. "Okay," she whispered, her voice broken. "Okay, I'll go." I watched as she turned and walked toward the stairs to our bedroom. The weight of the moment pressed down on me, heavy and suffocating. I listened to the sound of her footsteps on the stairs, the quiet thuds of drawers opening and closing as she began packing. I stood there in the living room, feeling numb, my heart burdened with a mixture of relief and a sadness I wasn't ready to face. The woman I had loved, the woman I had built a life with, was leaving. And as much as it hurt, as much as it ripped me apart inside, I knew this was the only way forward. I couldn't live with what she'd done. I couldn't pretend we could just go back to how things were. A few minutes later, Heather reappeared at the top of the stairs, a small suitcase in her hand. Her face was pale, eyes red and swollen from crying. She paused for a moment, standing there, looking down at me with eyes that seemed to beg for forgiveness, for any sign that I might change my mind. But I didn't move. I didn't say a word. I just stood there, my expression set in stone, my jaw clenched tight. She sighed, a soft, defeated sound, and slowly descended the stairs. As she walked past me, I felt the air between us grow colder, the distance between us more real than ever before. She reached the door, hesitated for a moment, and turned back one last time. "I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice so soft it barely reached me. "I really am." I couldn't respond. I just stared at her, my heart feeling like a stone in my chest. And then she was gone, the door clicking shut behind her. The sound echoed in the heavy silence of the house. I stood there for a long time, just staring at the door, letting the weight of everything settle over me like a suffocating blanket. She was gone, and with her, everything we had built, everything I thought I knew. The truth was out, and there was no turning back. The silence of the house pressed in on me, thick and overwhelming, as if the walls themselves were closing in. I stood there, my eyes still fixed on the door Heather had just walked through, feeling a swirl of emotions I could hardly name, rage, betrayal, emptiness. But one thought cut through the chaos. I wasn't done yet. Not by a long shot. I took a deep breath, running a hand over my face, trying to shake off the numbness that had settled over me. I couldn't just stand here, drowning in the wreckage. I had to do something, take action. I turned and walked into the kitchen, grabbing a glass and filling it with water from the tap. The cold liquid slid down my throat, but it did nothing to cool the fire that was still burning inside me. I pulled out my phone, scrolling through my contacts until I landed on the one I needed. Alyssa, Kevin's sister. She had always been friendly, even when Heather would brush her off at gatherings or ignore her messages. And now, Alyssa might just be the key to my next move. I hesitated for a moment, my thumb hovering over the call button. This wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. Alyssa and Kevin had been close for years, they were practically inseparable. But Alyssa was smart, sharp as a tack, and valued honesty over loyalty. She was never particularly fond of Heather either. Maybe she'd understand, or at least give me some insight into Kevin's weaknesses. I pressed the call button before I could change my mind. The phone rang twice before she answered. Matt? Her voice was clear, surprised but not unfriendly. What's going on? It's late. Alyssa, I need to talk to you, I said, doing my best to keep my voice steady. It's about Kevin and Heather. There was a pause, and I could almost hear her processing what I'd just said. Kevin and Heather, she repeated, a hint of caution slipping into her tone. What about them? I took a deep breath, deciding to get straight to the point. They've been having an affair, I said bluntly. 4 months. I found out tonight. Kevin admitted it. The silence hung in the air longer than I expected. Then Alyssa let out a long, frustrated sigh. Damn it, she muttered, like she had half expected this. I knew something was off, but I didn't want to believe it. So you suspected? I asked, feeling the tension rise in my voice. No, I didn't know for sure, she replied quickly. I had my doubts, but Kevin kept things pretty tight-lipped. I asked him a couple of times if he was seeing someone, but he brushed me off. Well, now you know, I said, feeling a bitter satisfaction at her discomfort. And I need your help. My help? Alyssa sounded wary now, unsure of where this conversation was heading. What exactly do you want me to do, Matt? I need to know everything, I said, my voice hard. Everything you can tell me about Kevin, his weaknesses, his habits, his business dealings. I want to make sure he doesn't walk away from this unscathed. Alyssa hesitated, and I could almost picture her face, the way her eyes would narrow when she was deep in thought, weighing her options. Look, Matt, she started slowly, I get that you're pissed. Hell, I'm pissed too. But if you're planning to do something reckless. I'm not asking for anything illegal, I cut her off, forcing my voice to stay calm. I just need information. I need to understand him better if I'm going to make my next move. She sighed again, and I heard the rustling of fabric as she shifted in her seat. All right, she said at last. But you need to know, Kevin's not the kind of guy who's easy to corner. He's got money, connections, and he's willing to play dirty when he needs to. I'm not worried about his money, I said through gritted teeth. I just want to make sure he knows he can't get away with this. Alyssa was quiet for a moment, and then I heard her typing in the background. Okay, she said, her voice more focused now. I'll help you. But you need to be careful, Matt. Kevin's already lost one marriage because of cheating. He's not going to let this one crumble without a fight. He's ruthless when he feels threatened. Trust me, I replied, cold determination lacing my words. I'm not afraid of a fight. We talked for another 10 minutes, Alyssa giving me the rundown of Kevin's schedule, his favorite spots, and the type of people he kept around him. I listened closely, soaking up every detail, every nugget of information that could give me an edge. When we finally hung up, a strange sense of calm settled over me. I had a plan now, a direction. And I knew exactly where to start. I grabbed my jacket and headed out the door, my mind racing with possibilities. It was time to visit someone who knew Kevin even better than Alyssa did. Someone who might give me the leverage I needed. I drove across town, the city lights blurring by as the quiet streets slipped past in the late-night silence. It didn't take long to get to the address I had in mind. Kevin's ex-wife, Megan. I'd met her once at a business function years ago, back when she and Kevin were still married. She had struck me as sharp, intelligent, and not someone who would take betrayal lightly. There was a fire in her eyes, and I hoped it was still burning. I parked outside her apartment building and took a deep breath, trying to steady myself. I had no idea how she'd react to seeing me or if she'd even talk to me. But I had to try. I needed to know more about Kevin's past if I was going to take him down. I walked up to the door and pressed the buzzer. A few moments passed before a voice crackled through the intercom. Who is it? A woman's voice, wary, tired. It's Matt, I said, doing my best to sound calm. Matt Roberts. We met a few years ago. I'm a friend of Kevin's. I need to talk to you. It's important. There was a long pause, and I half expected her to hang up or tell me to leave. But then the door buzzed open, and she spoke again, her voice colder now. Third floor. Apartment 3B. I stepped inside, adrenaline surging through me. This was it, the next move in a game I wasn't planning to lose. Climbing the stairs, I could feel the weight of everything pressing down on me. Heather's betrayal, Kevin's smug grin, the long battle ahead. I didn't know where it would lead or how it would end, but I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't backing down. Not yet. Not ever. I reached the third floor, each step feeling heavier than the last as scenarios played out in my head. What would Megan do? Slam the door in my face? Or would she be eager to help, given how Kevin had wronged her too? I hoped for the latter, but I wasn't counting on it. When I got to the door of apartment 3B, I hesitated for a moment, taking a deep breath to collect myself. Then I knocked. A few seconds later, the door opened. Megan stood in the doorway, her expression a mix of suspicion and curiosity. She looked older than I remembered, her once vibrant auburn hair now streaked with gray, and her face, though still striking, bore the weariness of someone who had been burned one too many times. Matt, she said, her voice flat, with no hint of warmth. What are you doing here? I need your help, I said bluntly. No point in beating around the bush. It's about Kevin. She crossed her arms, leaning against the doorframe. Of course it is, she muttered, a bitter smile curling on her lips. What's he done now? I glanced down the hallway, making sure no one was listening in. It's not just about what he's done to me, I replied, keeping my voice low. It's about what he's done to us. Megan raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Come in, she said finally, stepping aside to let me through. I walked into her apartment, immediately noticing how sparse it was. The living room was small, neatly organized with just a couch, a coffee table, and a few framed photos on the wall. Everything was clean, too clean, like she hadn't fully settled into her new life. Megan gestured toward the couch. Sit, she said, her tone still guarded. And start talking. I sat down, running a hand through my hair, trying to find the right words. Heather, I began, the name feeling heavy on my tongue. My wife. She's been having an affair with Kevin for the last 8 months. I found out tonight. Megan didn't seem shocked, but there was something in her eyes, something cold and knowing. I'm sorry, Matt, she said, though her voice carried no sympathy. But that doesn't surprise me. I nodded, having expected that response. I need your help, Megan. I need to know more about Kevin. Who he really is. How he operates. If I'm going to confront him, I need to be ready. Megan sighed and sat down across from me, crossing her legs and studying me intently. So, you want me to help you ruin him, she said flatly. I want justice, I replied, my voice cold and unwavering. For everything he's done to both of us. Megan stared at me for a long moment, then slowly nodded. All right, she said, her tone softening just a bit. I'll tell you everything you need to know. She leaned back in her chair, her eyes distant as though she was pulling memories she'd buried long ago. Kevin's always been a master at hiding who he really is, she began. On the surface, he's the perfect guy. Charming, successful, always saying the right thing. But underneath it all, he's ruthless. He manipulates people, toys with their emotions, and uses them until they have nothing left. That's what he did to me. I listened closely, absorbing every word. This was exactly what I needed, the truth behind Kevin's polished image. He's careful, Megan continued. He covers his tracks well, never leaves anything to chance. If you're planning to go after him, you have to be smart. He won't go down easy, and he's got plenty of resources. Lawyers, connections, people who owe him favors. I nodded, my mind racing with possibilities. Does he have any weaknesses? I asked. Anything I can exploit? Megan hesitated, then a small, bitter smile crept across her face. There's one thing, she said, her voice dropping. He's obsessed with control. He can't stand the idea of losing. If you can make him feel like his perfect life is falling apart, like he's losing control, he'll start to panic. And when Kevin panics, he makes mistakes. I filed that away, feeling a sense of grim satisfaction. What about his business? I asked. Alyssa mentioned he has connections. What's going on behind the scenes? Megan's eyes flickered with something, an emotion I couldn't quite pinpoint. Kevin's business is clean on the surface, she said carefully. But there are whispers, shady things he's involved in that could ruin him if they ever saw the light of day. Like what? She leaned in closer, her voice dropping even lower. Money laundering, she whispered. Through shell companies. He's been at it for years. I didn't find out until after the divorce, but by then, I couldn't do anything. If you can find proof of that, you've got him. A rush of adrenaline surged through me. This was the kind of leverage I needed. Any idea where I can start looking for that proof? I asked. Megan shook her head. I don't know specifics, but he's meticulous about his records. He keeps them hidden, probably in his office or somewhere he thinks no one will find them. I nodded, feeling a sense of purpose building inside me. Thank you, I said, standing up. You've helped more than you realize. Megan stood up as well, watching me carefully. Matt, she said, her voice soft but firm. Be careful. Kevin's dangerous. If you're going after him, make sure you're ready for whatever comes next. I met her gaze, my jaw clenched in determination. I will be. With that, I turned and left her apartment, the weight of everything pressing down on me. But now, I had a plan. I had the pieces I needed to bring Kevin down, to make him pay for everything. As I drove home, my mind buzzed with possibilities. The pieces were falling into place, and soon, I'd have everything I needed to confront Kevin. But when I pulled into my driveway, a familiar wave of dread washed over me. Heather's car was parked outside the house. She was back. My heart tightened with a mix of anger and confusion. I had told her to leave, to get out of my life. What was she doing here now? I parked the car and stepped out, my hands trembling with a swirl of emotions. Whatever reason she had for coming back, I was ready to hear it. But this time, I wouldn't let her off the hook so easily. I walked up to the front door and pushed it open. The house was quiet, the lights dimmed. As I made my way into the living room, there she was, sitting on the couch, her head in her hands, her body slumped in defeat. Heather looked up as I walked in, her face pale and streaked with tears. "Matt," she whispered, her voice trembling. "I'm sorry. I didn't know where else to go." I crossed my arms, my jaw tight. "Why are you here, Heather?" She stood up, her hands trembling. "I know you told me to leave, but I'm scared, Matt. Kevin, he's not who I thought he was. He's dangerous." I stared at her, my heart pounding. "Dangerous?" I echoed. "What are you talking about?" Heather looked down, tears spilling down her face. "After I left, he called me. He was furious. He said if I told you anything, he'd make sure we both paid for it. Matt, he knows you've been digging into his business. He's watching us." A cold chill ran through me. "What did you tell him?" "Nothing," she insisted, shaking her head frantically. "I swear, I didn't tell him anything. But he's not going to let this go. He knows you went to Megan. He knows about the documents." I pulled out the papers Megan had given me, waving them in front of Heather. "These?" I asked, my voice cold and steady. "These are going to ruin him. He'll pay for everything he's done." Heather's eyes widened with fear. "Matt, please," she whispered, taking a step back. "You don't understand. Kevin's not going to let you walk away with those. He's dangerous. He'll—" Before she could finish, there was a loud crash from outside, the unmistakable sound of glass shattering. I spun around, my heart racing, and caught sight of a dark figure moving past the window, heading toward the front door. Adrenaline surged through me, possibilities racing through my mind. Was it Kevin? Had he come to finish this? "Stay here," I ordered Heather, moving quickly toward the door. But before I could reach it, the door flew open, slamming against the wall. I staggered back, caught off guard as a tall, broad-shouldered man stepped inside, his face shadowed in the dim light. "Matt," the man said calmly, his voice cold and deliberate. "We need to talk." It was Kevin. He looked different now. Gone was the polished, charming man I'd seen at events. His face was hardened, his jaw clenched, his eyes filled with a cold fury. He glanced at Heather, then back at me, a twisted smile creeping across his face. "I warned you, didn't I?" he said, stepping further into the room. "I told you not to dig into my business, but you just couldn't help yourself. And now you're going to pay for that mistake." I took a step back, my hand instinctively moving toward the taser still in my pocket. "You've already caused enough damage, Kevin," I growled. "Get out. This is between you and me." Kevin shook his head, a mocking laugh escaping his lips. "Oh, it's not just between you and me anymore, Matt," he said, his voice dripping with menace. "Heather made sure of that. She called me, you know. Told me everything. Begged me to come here. Thought I could talk some sense into you." I glanced at Heather, shock and betrayal washing over me. "You called him?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. "You brought him here?" Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head frantically. "No, Matt, I swear I didn't." "Enough." Kevin snapped, cutting her off. He reached into his jacket, pulling out a small, sleek handgun and aiming it straight at me. "You've got something that belongs to me," he said, his voice eerily calm. "Hand it over, and maybe no one gets hurt. For a moment, the room spun. My mind raced, adrenaline flooding my veins. The documents. That's what he wanted. I hesitated, weighing my options, but before I could make a move, Heather stepped forward, her hands raised in a desperate attempt to calm Kevin down. "Kevin, please," she pleaded, her voice shaking. "You don't have to do this. We can talk about it. We can." "Shut up," Kevin shouted, swinging the gun toward Heather. "I'm done talking. This is on you, Heather. You never knew when to keep quiet." And then, in an instant, everything changed. The gun fired. A deafening crack echoed through the room, and I watched in horror as Heather stumbled back, clutching her side, her eyes wide with shock. Blood seeped through her fingers, staining her shirt, and she crumpled to the floor with a gasping breath. "Heather!" I shouted, rushing to her side, my heart hammering in my chest. I dropped down, pressing my hands against the wound, desperate to stop the bleeding. "Stay with me," I pleaded, panic surging through me. "Please, stay with me." Her gaze met mine, her face pale, her breath coming in shallow, painful gasps. "Matt. I'm sorry," she whispered, her voice faint, barely a whisper. "I never meant for any of this to happen." Her eyelids fluttered, and a cold wave of terror washed over me. "No, no, no," I muttered frantically, pressing harder against the wound, my hands slick with blood. "Stay with me, Heather. Don't you dare leave me now." But she didn't respond. Her body went slack, her breathing slowing until it stopped altogether. Tears stung my eyes, and a scream of rage built in my throat. Kevin stood over us, the gun still in his hand, his face cold and emotionless. "I didn't come here to kill anyone, Matt," he said softly, his voice disturbingly calm. "But you pushed me too far. Now give me the documents." I glared up at him, my vision blurred with tears, my heart pounding in my chest. "You're not getting anything," I growled, my voice raw with fury. "You've already taken everything from me." Kevin sneered, stepping closer, the gun aimed directly at my head. "Last chance, Matt," he said, his voice low and threatening. "Hand over the papers, or you end up just like her." My hand tightened around the taser in my pocket. I had one shot, one chance to make this right. I shifted my weight slightly, adrenaline coursing through me, and then I lunged forward, pulling the taser out and firing at Kevin's chest. The electric crackle filled the room as the prongs hit their mark. Kevin's body jerked violently, his face contorting in agony as he dropped the gun and collapsed backward. I didn't waste a second. I grabbed the gun, my hands trembling, and stood over him, breathing heavily, my chest rising and falling with each ragged breath. "Stay down," I warned, my voice shaking with a mix of fear and rage. "Stay the hell down." Kevin glared up at me, his face twisted with hatred, but he didn't move. I turned back to Heather, my heart shattering as I knelt beside her. Her breathing was shallow, her skin cold to the touch. "Help is coming," I whispered, my voice cracking with emotion. "Just hang on. Please." But deep down, I knew it was too late. The sirens wailed in the distance, the flashing lights of the approaching ambulance casting eerie shadows on the walls. I held Heather close, feeling the life slip away from her with every passing second. In that moment, I realized everything was lost. The woman I had loved, the life we had shared, the future I thought we had, it was all gone. As the paramedics rushed in, pushing me aside, I knew one thing with brutal certainty. No matter what happened to Kevin, no matter how much he suffered, it would never be enough to fill the void he'd left in his wake. Because the game was over. And there were no winners here. Only the wreckage of everything we used to be.